Hello, I'm Franco Fasoli, artist from Argentina, Buenos Aires, Argentina. And here we are in LaCa Projects, North Carolina, Charlotte. I was taking part of the McCall art residency for the last 4 months. And during that time also I've been working for this show, INTIMISMOS, that I share with Octavio Garabello. There is also an Argentinian artist that lives in Germany. I live in Spain. So all this show, the whole idea of this show, it was based on that, based on how two artists immigrate into another country and how they see the closest surrounding space, based on this kind of isolation that creates this idea of move from your hometown. So we take us our home or our family or our closest family as a subject for this show, and we've been sharing these ideas by messages and distance, and it's called INTIMISMOS. There is this kind of intimacy that we have or that we see through our devices, and yeah, we've been working for the last half of the year. In distance, and then we ended up meeting us here in Charlotte this past February. That we had the chance to set it up and curate everything with Juan Bolare, that was also the curator of the show, and it was a great time just before this whole madness. So I'm gonna make this virtual tour through the show, starting with these 2 pieces that we share this front door, or this front wall, 2 kind of signature images of what in the whole show it's about. So let's go. It's a pretty big gallery, so for us was very important to kind of cover the whole space, but at the same time not like trying to push the pieces because of the space. It was more like the pieces that talk with itself. That's why our this kind of create that kind of intimacy of each piece by themselves. Right here we're sharing also the space between the 2 of us. Octavio works in this case are scenes from kind of super intimacy, because it's him also there, kind of naked. But also talking about art history at some point, having Matisse and De Chirico in this imaginary. At the same time, this one that it's also an Octavio piece, there are based on, of course, art books that he has in his home. And I remember that he talked to me that he was very interested in this piece, specifically how he was seeing this reflections on the glass, that it's something that also repeats in so many of those pieces. This can give you the idea of how close he was seeing his surroundings in Berlin. Also over here are 2, I think one of the biggest pieces that Octavio has in this show, that it was his old work, where he was sanding and sanding pieces of wood for months, and he took those images from his work in Germany and create these pieces that are based on are painted with pigments. So we both have very different ways to work. He worked basically with pigments and mediums, and I work with paper. All my pieces here, or most of my pieces here, are cut collage papers. So this one is pigment on canvas, and I was working these images on paper. Those are also images from my house that I send through WhatsApp or Instagram message with my girlfriend and with my family in Argentina. So this idea of the connection, but in the distance, that it's very private for us, but at the same time how we share through the devices, it was also very important, especially for me, and how I was seeing my life as a foreigner and how I interact with my family and my friends, always in this kind of distance, but this closeness. It was all about this feeling. And over here We have also this dialogue between those two pieces with Octavio and myself. Also this game of the interaction that he was very interested, also making this big reference of Escher drawings or lithographs. In my case, this is my cat that I've been living with him for the last 5 years in Spain, so he became a very closest figure for me in many of my works. And this is a classic situation in my home there in Spain. This is my floor that I was working with, based on that floor for also many of those pieces, and the toys that I've been just setting in my plants in my home. So it's a very intimacy image, but at the same time, this has this kind of mystery that is something could happen in there, because it's a black figure over there in the back, and this setting that it looks that is setting, but it's just a random picture that I took of my cat that morning. And over here, it's those two pieces that are made here during my time in the McCall residency, and are the only ones that are kind of abstract. They are not abstract. I mean, they are two pieces of fabric, two Mexican fabrics that I have at home, and I asked my girlfriend to send pictures of it, because mostly of the time the cat is underneath those blankets. So I like this idea of making this abstraction, but at the same time it's just a figurative piece of these blankets. And since the last 2 years also I've been working a lot in this combination of materials, of the fragility of the paper and with other kind of materials. In this case I use these metal fences, kind of giving the pieces the idea of a furniture. So also this connect with this kind of home, the furniture that you have in your home, or things that can be related with your space. And I mixed, or I clash or juxtapose the materials of that I've been working. So that's why in this case I was very interested in use this blanket with this kind of cold and tough metal fence that they are hanging on from them. Over here, you can see the same kind of idea of work with, in this case, was furniture that I already found. That it's this kind of garden thing for the plants. But I like the shape or the idea, just popped up the idea of this spider web that it's in every home. So I create this collage of this corner of my home. Also, it's a corner from my home with a spider that combines with a piece of wood. This kind of just the piece that is this surface just go beyond just the surface and became something else. Could be a sculpture, could be also an object. And it's something that I was exploring also a lot during my residency here in the McCall. So I was very interested in just see how it works during the show also. We have this section of the show. There are a few pieces of mine that are there are 3 different pieces, also different in times. We have pieces from 2017, 2018, and 2020. And the idea of put all these 3 pieces together is because this kind of circle that it happens in my work and also in my life in the last several years, that it coming from an imaginary that was more classic for me about this clashing and struggles, or sometimes fights that are not necessarily violent on it, and then it turns into this image that I've been working during that time, also based in my home, but they still have this kind of clashing, but at the same time can be seen as a struggle, or even as a sexual thing, but you have no specific idea what is happening, but it's something happening. It's this kind of tension that it can happen in the intimacy space. And I ended up with this piece that I made it here. It's a very recent piece that it has this kind of connection with the same image that where all these circles started, having this kind of fighters or lovers in the back. That is also in a piece. And this image of myself, or a version of myself in the early morning, kind of changing clothes, but at the same time I was thinking about this idea of changing skin also, how we as artists, we change the ideas of how we propose the language that we create, and how we change that whole imaginary. And it's something that it was happening for me also during this residency, that I was plenty time just for thinking and work by myself, alone, without my family and without my closest ones. So this idea of this routine of thinking and just living with my process of work, it was very important during this time. So that's why this piece came about, like this kind of changing something that it was protecting you, and you're just throwing away and putting something else. And over here we finish this area with some Octavio's pieces. In this side are the only pieces that are based, or a few of the only pieces that are based in outside images, but still this kind of intimacy. This is our Octavio's friends studying outside in the airport in Berlin, and how he sees his closest ones over there. They're studying theoretical neuroscientists, so he was very into that. And over here, we have also this device connection with friends and family. This is a home-based image of Octavio and his ex-girlfriend. How we communicate each other, but at the same time we are in a totally internet cloud that avoid us from the connection. So it is kind of connection, but totally away. And also this iPhone full of people, and I think it's a very common image for all of us of how we have stash our friends, how we separate them into the phones and the devices, and the connection that we have with them. You know, it's something that even thought about even just even when I was I was thinking in that just before I moved to Spain. You know, like how we interact with people that day by day was your closest family, and then in some point they ended up into your mobile phone, and how it turns the whole feeling with that person into a emoji or into a photo that you receive. And I think that with Octavio happens the same situation, and we have many of those talkings in the time that we have here. How we deal with this idea of being a foreign artist, specifically artists that are very interested in this kind of melancholic way to see the way the space they are living right now and the space that they used to live in the past. So it was very interesting for me share these kind of thoughts, especially with an artist that we have the same background, we study in the same space, but we never met before. So was an interesting experience for me, not only being here for so long, also connect with an artist that has this kind of the same thoughts, and we ended up having this amazing show, both of us. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience, and I hope that if the Corona allowed us to see it in person again, I would be more than happy to receive everybody that want to talk with me during the time that I'm gonna be here.